Hi guys, you're going to watch the most comprehensive video on TEF Canada writing exam specific preparation. So I highly recommend that you watch this video with no distraction and please have a pen and a paper handy because you are going to take a lot of notes. Also, I'm sorry this video is going to be a bit long, but I wanted to put together everything at one place so that you don't have to hop on from one video to another. So let's get started and let's go to my laptop. By the end of this video, you will know how many sections do we have in the exam and more background on each, suggestions on time management between two sections, what is the right structure to be used for section A and section B, my strategies to get a higher score, some examples from my writing for each section. I will also share some feedback that I got from my teacher which helped me to improve my writing gradually. And in the end, I would share some suggestions for beginners and advanced learners on how and when you should actually start working on exam specific preparation. So in TEF Canada writing exam, you get two sections and you have 60 minutes to complete those sections and you will get your final score out of 450 points. So section A is fait divers, which basically means breaking news, wherein you'll get 2-3 lines of a situation. You'll have to read it, imagine a story, and then you have to elaborate it. You have to write 80 words, but it is advisable to not go beyond 100 to 120 words because you also need to spare some time for section B, which has a higher weightage. And also, when the limit is 80 words, we should really not go beyond 100 and we should not mention information which is really not required. So we'll talk more about the structure in a second. But let's look at the type of question that you'll get during the exam. So if you have been using Prep My Future for exam specific preparation, you might have seen it already. So this is the kind of text that you get and you'll be asked to read this situation and then write 80 words. And it is also advisable to write various paragraphs, and at the bottom of the screen, you can see that there is a blank screen with a timer on the top right corner and one virtual keyboard at the bottom of the screen. This is exactly how you'll get it in the exam. And every time you want to use a French word or French accent, you will have to click on this virtual keyboard and you'll have to then close it. And you can't copy paste anything. So it also takes time to open and close this virtual keyboard multiple times. And that is why time management is very essential. So in section A, it is advisable to use not more than 20 minutes and spare about 35 to 40 minutes for section B. So as soon as you get a situation, so probably let me take an example. For instance, if you have a situation that there was a girl who was saved from drowning in a river by two strangers, but they were surprised to see her reaction. That's it. This is the situation you have, and now you have to come up with a story on this situation. So I remember when I wrote this Fait divers, I had written something like they saved her, but then she wasn't happy because she actually wanted to commit a suicide or something because she was depressed. And then somebody confirmed from her family that she was also undergoing some treatment. So something of that sort. So just to write this small story, I think it should be manageable in about 100 to 120 words if you know the structure well and if you plan it very well in the exam. So if you take like 5 minutes to plan your story, then you would definitely able to write it in just 10 to 12 minutes. And then you would also have couple of minutes to review. And it is very important to review because when we write, we don't realize we make some grammatical mistakes, we make spelling mistakes. So it is important to review what we have written and to correct those errors because that would help you to get a higher score. So let's look at one example from my writing. So in this situation, we have le week-end dernier, un couple péruvien au grimpé au sommet d'un volcan de la cordillère des Andes. Il désirait se marier à l'altitude record de 5825 mètres. So basically, last weekend, 20 couples have climbed up to the highest altitude in order to get married. So this is the situation that you have, and now you have to think about a story. So before we talk about the story, let's look at the structure first. So whenever we write a fait divers, we first give the introduction of the situation, that what happened, and then we give some background information on that, that why that happened, and then we give one comment from one of the person who was involved in that situation. So if you stick to this structure, you would be able to actually manage it pretty well in 20 minutes. So if I were to break it down one by one, so let's look at introduction. For this part, I always use 4Ws method, in which I talk about when, who, what, and where. So basically when, last Saturday, who, there were 20 couples. What, they climbed up to the Volcan Dezan. So this is basically where, and after training themselves during 1 year. So I'm just saying that last Saturday, 20 couples managed to climb up to the highest altitude after training themselves during 1 year. So this is just the basic overall introduction of the situation. Then I have to give the background of why this actually happened. So in background, I'm saying toutes les personnes dans le groupe étaient des amis de l'université. Les Tontenec rêvaient de se marier de manière différente, unique et d'entrer également dans le record du monde Guinness en célébrant leur mariage dans la plus haute altitude de la ville. So in background information, I'm just saying that those 20 couples climbed up to the highest altitude. Why? Because all of them were actually friends from a university, and I'm saying Le Fontenac, basically I'm giving their age also, that they were in their 30s, and they, at this moment when they climbed up the highest altitude, they were in 30s, and they always dreamed of getting married in a different and a unique way, and they also wanted to enter the world's Guinness record while celebrating their marriage at the highest altitude of the city. So this is the background information that I've given. And then to close my fait divers, I'm just giving one comment from one person in this group who said that we managed to climb up, but while we were climbing down, we faced a lot of difficulties. That's it. So basically, in the introduction section, I was able to cover what happened, who was involved in it, when did it happen, and where it happened. Then in background information, I actually give pretty good information in terms of where these people came from, why they decided to do it. And then in the last information, I'm just talking about after this event has happened, what one of the person from the group had to share with us. That's it. So next, let's look at the tenses that I have used here, because in fait divers it is very important to make sure that we are using the right tense. So in first section, if you see, I'm using passé composé because I'm talking about some event which has just happened in the near past. So I'm using passé composé. Then in the background information, because I'm giving this information way back in the past, because when these people were in university, at that time only they decided to get married in a unique way. So that's why I'm using passé composé as well as imparfait, because I'm talking about a situation way back in the past. And then verbatim is simply in the past, passé composé in near past tense. So that is the structure. So I think if you stick to the structure, you would be able to manage it pretty well in 20 minutes. But just make sure that you include all of this information, because if you just say 20 couples did this in this particular place and you don't say when, you might lose points. So in introduction, especially, all these 4Ws are extremely important to include. Then when you talk about background information, you don't have to stick to why and how all the time, but that may help you to think about what you really want to say. But background information is really just why these people decided to do this particular activity. And in verbatim, if you see just one small point, So in French, when they write any verbatim, so before the quote, there is always a space. And after they end a quote, they don't use a full stop, they use a comma. That's why I'm using a comma, and this is something that you can keep a note of. If you look at the number of words, I was able to actually do it in just 89 words, which was, I think, perfect because we have a limit of 80 words. And I didn't try to overdo it because by reading this, I feel that I was able to provide all the necessary information, and I have not missed out on anything. And also, I didn't want to give too much information. It's important to just give to the point information, but at the same time, you should be able to cover everything about the story, which is important for a reader to know. And then if you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see some remarks from my teacher. Number of words 90, very good. Good writing overall. Structure is respected and it is also clear. So basically, she also agrees that I have followed the structure, and at the same time, the story that I'm telling is clear and it doesn't look incomplete. Now, let's look at another example. In this case, there is a person 31 years old from Belgium who is unemployed and who was able to find $6,000, 6,000 euros in his letterbox outside his house. And along with the cash, he also found a message which says, "Good luck." So that's it. This is the situation that we have, and now we have to think about a story. So in introduction, you'll see that I'm using 4W's rule, and I'm saying Mardi dernier, Bruno agit d'attente un an, a retrouvé une enveloppe dans sa boîte aux lettres avec un message, bonne chance. So in first statement, I was able to tell that last Tuesday, Bruno, who is 31 years old, he found an envelope in his letterbox with the message good luck, and along with that he was surprised to see that there was also 6,000 euros in the envelope. Hence I'm using passé composé, but I just noticed that I'm also using imparfait, which is in the last line, il y avait également. So basically in introduction I'm using passé composé and l'imparfait. Now, in the background information, I'm saying that this person had recently lost his job and he wanted to create his own company for which he needed exactly the same amount for initial investment. Now, here, if you see, I'm including some information for why, like why this money was important for him because he wanted to create his own company for which he needed the exactly same amount. But there is no how as such. So why and how that I talked about for background information is just to have an idea about what information we can include. But if you can come up with a strong background, you don't really need to stick to why and how. But for introduction, it's important to stick to 4Ws. Now, if you look at the verbatim, I'm using one comment from this person. Basically, this person is saying that his best friends who had always motivated him would have given him this gift. If his company succeeds, he would be able to live the life of his dream from now on. So now, if you look at the sentence structure, my friends who had always motivated me, m'aurait fait su cadeau. M'aurait fait is passé conditionnel tense, which is a very good tense structure. So you can use it because basically this person is not sure who has given him this gift, but is saying that my friends who always motivated me would have given me this gift. So for would have, I'm using m'aurait fait su cadeau. So this is a very good grammar rule. You can use it, and I'm sure if you use it, you would get a slightly higher score. And then in the last statement, si mon entreprise réussit, je pourrai désormais vivre la vie de mes rêves. In this statement, I'm using conditional tense. So basically, I'm saying if it happens, then I could do this. So this is a conditional tense that I'm using. So overall, if you look at this structure, mostly we use passé composé, l'imparfait, passé conditionnel. It's very rare that you use a present tense. Actually, you can. I think I might have it in the next example, but mostly we use passé composé, l'imparfait, and conditional in fait divers. In terms of number of words, I've written it in 95 words, which is fine. And in terms of the comments, my teacher says that 95 words is not bad. Overall, good writing and good structure. Now, in the next example, so basically there is a building which has got fire, and there is a lady along with three children stuck on the last floor of the building. Like previous two examples, I'm using introduction with four W's, in which I'm saying that last Monday, Patricia, I'm just giving a name to this lady who is 35 years old, found herself in the middle of the fire with her three kids in her apartment, which is in the fourth arrondissement do Paris. And then this is basically the introduction that I've given, in which I'm using passé composé and present tense, because in the last line I'm saying the apartment which is located in this area of Paris. So for that particular part, I'm using the present tense, but otherwise the first line is in the passé composé form. Now, in the background information, I'm saying les secours, les pompiers est aussitôt arrivé sur les lieux après avoir reçu un appel d'un voisin et a tout de suite transporté la famille à l'hôpital. So, in the second part, I'm saying that the help arrived very quickly after receiving a call from a neighbor, and they quickly transported the family to hospital. Now in this part, in the background information, you can see that I've included something which we can say how. How did the help arrive? After receiving a call from a neighbor, but there is no why as such. So you don't have to, like as I said earlier, you don't have to stick to why and how for the background information, but just make sure that you give sufficient information. Now, in terms of verbatim, I'm using it from a doctor who says that fortunately none of the members of the family faced a damage, like a serious damage, and they can return to their home in few days. So in verbatim, I'm using passé composé and conditional because the person is saying that they could return home after few dails. Il pourrait rentrer chez eux. So I'm using conditional tense here. So basically, after you talk about introduction, background information, and then you give one verbatim, you can also talk about after this situation has happened, what is happening now. So in this case, I'm saying that investigation is still going on to identify the origin of that fire. However, according to our sources, it seems like fire would have started from a short circuit because of the charger of a telephone. So again, if you see here, the first line is l'enquête est en cours, which is the present tense. I think I missed mentioning present tense on the right hand side, but I'm using present tense here because I'm saying the investigation is still going on. And then I'm saying, according to our sources, it would have been started. So again, I'm using conditional tense here. Aurait lancé, aurait été déclenché. So this is a good structure. You can keep a note of it, and probably you can also use it in your example. So just to summarize, in fait divers, you can just stick to three paragraphs, one being introduction, then background information and verbatim. But if you want, you can also just give one or two lines for the present update on that situation. And that's it. If you stick to this format, you would definitely be able to manage it in 120 words, and 20 minutes might actually be more than enough for you. So again, in this case, since I'm using present update, which is the last paragraph, I'm using slightly more words, which is 115, but according to my teacher, it's not bad. And she's saying she likes the writing. The story is well written and well said. Vocabulary is also rich. For section A, if you go to this website, fedivec.org, you would actually, if you read some of these fedivec, you would realize that the kind of structure that we are using is actually very similar to the structure of fedivec, which is actually being used. So in the first statement, you can see that they are also kind of using four W's. Then when they are giving the background information, they are using l'imparfait, and then they're using one quote from from somebody, either the person who has been through this situation or somebody else who knows this person. If you are just starting out and you are learning about how to write it, you can use my examples, but you can also go through this particular website and you can read about some feedback. And apart from that, here I've mentioned some of the topics that you can use to practice, and you can take screenshot of this particular page, and then there is one more page. So I've put together about 30 topics, and you can use these topics to write and practice, and then you can get it checked by somebody, your friend who knows French, or maybe a teacher if you're working with a teacher. And if you do this regularly, this would actually help you a lot to improve gradually. Now, moving on to section B. In section B, you have to write a letter. So you'll get a topic related to society, travel, food consumption, internet, education system, language, or environment. You have to imagine that you have read this article in a newspaper, and then you have to write a letter to the editor of newspaper, and you have to explain whether you agree with their opinion or you disagree with their opinion, and you have to write it in 200 words. But it is very difficult to actually write it in just 200 words. So it is advisable to stay between 250 to 300, but you should really not go beyond 300 words, because more you write, more chances will be to make mistakes. So try to write to the point, but if you stay between 250 to 300, I think that would be the ideal range. So this is one of the examples of section B. So avec l'ordinateur, les enfants n'ont plus besoin d'apprendre à écrire à la main. So this is the topic that you have, and you have to write it in 200 words. Similar to section A, you'll get exactly same screen, and you'll have a timer on the top right corner, and at the bottom of the screen there would be a virtual keyboard with some French alphabets. You can actually toggle between two screens. You don't have to write section A first and then section B. You can start with section B also, but I would advise do section A first, because section B requires more time, it has more weightage. So just get done with section A first and then move to section B. But you can always toggle between the two. If you have more time after writing section B, you can always go back to section A to check it one more time if you have some time. Now, in terms of time management, for section B, again, you should take at least 5 to 7 minutes to plan, because when you have a topic, you have to write at least three arguments to either support or disagree with the article that you have read. So you have to think about three unique arguments. So take your time to plan it well and then write it. So if you take about 5 to 7 minutes to plan it, then you should be able to write it in 25 minutes. And always make sure that you have 5 to 10 minutes to review, because similar to section A, in section B also you might make some spelling mistakes, you might make some grammatical mistakes. And also, since we have a virtual keyboard, we have to open it and close it like multiple times. That also takes some time. So if you have missed using some alphabet with French accents, you may want to go back and check it. So just make sure that you have some time to review the entire letter at least twice, because that is going to be the most important thing. It's fine if you have not written very fancy letter, but if you can just make sure that you have only made couple of mistakes, I'm sure that you would be able to get a better score. Now let's look at one example. Les robots remplaceraient les humains dans toutes les professions. Robots will replace all human beings in all the professions. So the ideal structure that you should be using for a letter is this. First, give your introduction. An introduction should not be more than 2 lines. Then give three arguments. So those could be in support of the topic or against the topic, and then conclusion. So for introduction, the first statement is going to be very simple. So I'm just going to explain it in English first, and then we'll look at one example from my writing. In introduction, there should be just two statements. First statement, why are you writing this letter? So in first line, you will say that I'm writing this letter in reaction to the article that I read in your newspaper, which says that robots will replace humans in all the professions. That's it. This would be your first statement. Then what is your opinion on the topic, for, against, or mixed, would be your second statement. So in introduction, in second statement, you would say, I disagree with this statement. and I'm going to explain my reasons with you in the letter below. That's it. So this would be your introduction. Now in arguments, if you agree with this statement, you'll have to give three arguments in support of it. If you disagree, you'll have to give three arguments against it. But you may also have a mixed opinion. So you may think that you have one reason in support and two reasons against, and probably you would have one reason against and two reasons in support. So you can do that as well. And there is a structure to follow for that, and we'll talk about it later. So let's just look at the structure for each of these arguments. So for one argument, you should ideally have just three statements, two to three statements. So in first statement, you'll introduce your argument. So if your argument is that many humans have already been replaced by robots in the past, then this would be your idea. Then your second statement would be you would develop that idea in 1 to 2 lines, and then you would give one supporting example. So your idea should be very concise and it should not go beyond 1 line, maybe maximum 1.5 line, but it should be very concise. And then you have to explain that idea in next 1 to 2 lines, which is this part, development of idea, and then just give one example and that's it. If you stick to this structure, each argument would not take more than 3 to 4 lines, and your size of each argument in terms of number of words and number of lines should also be similar. It should not be like argument 1 you have written in 6 lines and then argument 2 and 3 are in 3 lines. It should always be very similar structure and number of words. So if you stick to this structure, then you would actually be able to write these three arguments in probably similar number of words. Now, after the argument, the last thing is conclusion. So conclusion should generally be just 1 line statement, but it can be 2 line statement also. Now, to write a conclusion, there are two ways. One, you summarize all three arguments or all three arguments that you have written before. So if you do that, then you will actually summarize each idea, and then it will take some space, and probably you'll write just one statement of your conclusion in 2 to 3 lines. The other way is you just don't repeat these arguments again and just say that based on the arguments provided above, I agree to this statement or I disagree to this statement. That's it. And it would not take you more than 1 to 2 lines to conclude your letter. And there is no point repeating the arguments that you have already stated earlier, because you're going to just take more number of words and you're going to waste time, and rather you can actually utilize that time to review your letter. So I would suggest to stick to second option and just don't repeat your arguments in conclusion. Now, there are some strategies which you can use to get a higher score in each part. In introduction, you'll still stick to these two statements, and by just adding a little element to your second statement, you can actually increase your chances of getting a higher score. Let me explain it. So here I'm saying that just add a personalized detail. So when you write what is your opinion, you can say as a technology researcher, I agree with your opinion. So by just adding as a technology researcher, it shows to the reader that you have actually put yourself in the situation or in that position when you're thinking about this topic. Because see, for introduction and conclusion, most people end up writing a well memorized structure, and that shows the reader that you have not really added anything new to your introduction or conclusion, and probably you are just using that standard introduction format. And in those cases, I've heard that you don't really get marked on introduction and conclusion as such, and you are only left with these arguments part to get scores on your writing part. So if you just add this little personalized element to your introduction, examiner may actually find it different than what other people have written, and then your introduction would also be considered for the final score. So this is a little strategy that I had used, and I'm sure that might have helped me to get a higher score. Now, in terms of the main body structure, which is your three arguments, there are few things that you need to keep in mind, which are extremely important. Number one, each topic statement should be unique and there should not be any contradiction. So in argument one, that if you're saying, yes, I agree that all robots will replace human beings, then in second argument, you can't say that, no, but I think they can't replace everyone. It should not be contradicting. Then the next thing is almost same length of each argument. I think I've already talked about it. So basically, if you're writing 4 lines for argument one, for two and three also it should be four or maybe five, but not beyond that. Now, the next point is write less and make less mistakes. I think this is something which I have learned with time. I used to write a lot and I used to also make more mistakes. So I have learned with time that it's best to write to the point, and that would also help you to make less mistakes. So that is also something very important. The next one is use of appropriate connectors. So when you are introducing your idea and then you are developing it and then you are giving examples, before each of these sentences, there is a set of connecting words that we should be using, which I'll talk about later. So always make sure that you're using appropriate linking words, and which helps the reader to understand the chain of thoughts that you are trying to express in your writing. Then the last one is use relevant expressions, subjunctive and different tenses. So when you're writing a letter, you should try and actually include different type of tenses to show variety of tenses that you are comfortable with, because that would help you to get a higher score. And you can also use subjunctive when required and when possible. You should not force fit. And you can also use some expressions, because these are some elements which will help you to get a higher score, but at the same time you should make sure that you're using them only when required. Very similar to introduction, in conclusion also, to make it unique or different from what generally people write, you should try and add one element or one line which makes it unique, and I'll talk about it on the next page. But for introduction and for conclusion, just follow the structure which we should be following, but also try to make it slightly unique from other people. All right, so let's look at one example. I'll basically take the same example that robots are going to replace all the human beings in all the professions. So this is the topic that we have, and we have to write a letter. So to start with, we always write Monsieur le rédacteur en chef. Then my first line is, why are you writing this letter? So I'm saying, je vous écris en réaction à votre article paru le juin dans lequel vous affirmiez que les robots remplaceraient les humains dans toutes les professions. So very simple, you are just saying that I'm writing this letter to you in reaction to the article that I read on 8th of June, in which you have said that all the robots are going to replace people in all the professions. So this is why you're writing this letter. This line is generally very standard. You don't have to improvise it as such. You can use the same format. Now in the next line, we have to talk about what is your opinion on the topic. So I'm saying, as a researcher in one technology company. So this is the personal element that I've added to the second line, which would help me to make my introduction unique from other people. Then I'm saying, while I understand your reasoning, I have a mixed opinion on the subject, and I would like to explain it, and I would like to explain why in the following. So I'm going to provide mixed opinion. So my one argument is going to be for, and two arguments are going to be against, because I am actually against this statement, and that is why I have majority of my arguments against this topic, and only one argument is for this topic. So if you look at the first part, I've already talked about it. This is a personalized detail that I've added. But also, if you look at this part, bien que je comprenne, this is a subjunctive that I'm using. I'm using a subjunctive here only because it was natural to use it here, because I'm saying while I understand your reasoning. Otherwise, if it was not required, I would not force fit to use subjunctive here, and I would rather keep it natural. Now let's look at the second part. In the second part, we have to come up with 3 unique arguments, and you would have already thought about these arguments in your planning time, the 5 or 7 minutes time that you had taken. It's very important that you think about these 3 unique arguments in those 5 to 7 minutes only. So if I just quickly mention about the three arguments. In first argument, I'm saying that certainly we cannot deny the fact that robots have already replaced some professionals. Then I'm going to explain it, like expand it later. Then in the second argument, I'm saying, however, the future of robotization, which is going on at the moment, is not certain. So in the third argument, I'm saying there are many domains like doctors, pilots, police, which can never be replaced by a robot because human intervention would be essential. Now, if you see in the third argument, this is actually pretty long because I have added some examples also, the doctors, the pilots, the police, but I would say this is not an ideal structure and you can actually just mention it in one line and you can give your example in a separate statement. But if you want to put all of these together, you can do that, but then just make sure that whatever you are writing makes sense and it doesn't confuse the reader. So I wanted to give you these different kind of arguments just to give you an idea that you don't really have to just stick to one line argument, but that is the ideal structure. So if I were to write it in the exam, I would actually cut down my argument 3 and I would say ailleurs, il existe plusieurs métiers dans lesquels les robots ne pourraient jamais remplacer les professionnels. That's it. That would have been my opening statement. And then in the next statement, I will talk about examples like les médecins, les pilotes, les policiers, etc. Now, the second part is development of idea. So because in argument 1 and in argument 2, I have written my open statement in just one line, it was important for me to explain it further. But if you see in argument 3, I'm not actually explaining it further because I had already explained it well in one statement only. Now, part is where I give examples. Because my first argument is in support of the topic statement, which is robots will replace everyone. I am giving one example of cases where robots have already replaced some human beings. Now, in the second argument, because I'm saying that their future is not certain, then I'm giving an example in which I'm saying that, for example, autonomous vehicles and drones, which are being used for delivering of products, have actually led to many accidents on the road in US, and that is why many people have actually taken a step back from the use of such technology. And then since in third argument, I'm saying that there are many professionals like doctors, pilots, and police who can never be replaced by robots. I'm giving a example in that support, and I'm saying that recently there was a survey which was done on 100 directors in the US, and they basically said that only 4 out of 10 people would be replaced by robots in the near future. So that's how I've written it. If you look at it, my all three arguments are unique, and I'm using three statement format. So first statement, introduction of idea. Second statement, explanation of those ideas. And third statement is examples on each of them. Now, the next thing is to see whether we have met all the criteria that we need for argument section to make sure that we get a higher score. So the first thing is each topic statement should be unique with no contradiction. Yes, we have met this condition and we have discussed this already. It should be almost same length for each argument. Yeah, so we have 3, 4 and 4 lines, which is very close. Then write less and make less mistakes. And then the next one is use of appropriate connectors. So before the first statement, we are using connectors cert, pneumoa, pa, ayer. Before expanding it, we are using en effet, après, and then before examples, we are using à titre d'exemple, par conséquent, et sous l'eau, un sondage. So we are using appropriate connectors before each element of each argument. Now, next thing is conclusion. In conclusion, we generally use one statement line in which we basically just say that in conclusion, for the three reasons mentioned above in three arguments, I stay convinced that while robots have already replaced some professionals, they can never threaten all the domains. So I've just summarized it in one line. I'm not talking about each argument per se because I don't want to make my conclusion too long. And this is exactly why I've just mentioned that based on the three reasons mentioned above, because there is no point repeating them and we want to keep it to the point. Now, the next element of conclusion is basically to make it slightly different from the standard format that people generally use. So, in second statement, in conclusion, I'm saying néanmoins, j'essaierai intéressé de voir un sondage réalisé auprès des professionnels afin de connaître leur avis. So basically, it means that, however, I would be interested to see a survey of professionals in order to know their opinion as well. And I'm saying opinion of other professionals because in introduction, I had written that as a researcher in a technology company. So I'm a professional myself, and that's why I'm saying that I would like to know the opinion of other professionals as well. So these elements in introduction and conclusion is something that you can tweak based on the topic that you have, but these elements would actually help you to get a higher score and basically to make your introduction and conclusion different and unique from what generally people write. Apart from the structure that we have discussed so far, there are some things which we should always keep in mind when we are writing. So first one is synonyms. It is extremely important that we make sure we are not using same words multiple times in the letter. So to take an example, in topic statement we have les robots remplaceraient les humains. So I don't want to use this word replacer all the time and I would like to use variety of words. So for verb remplacer, I'm using synonyms like mis au chômage. Mis au chômage means that robots have already laid off some professionals. So mis au chômage is a good expression. Then in the second line, I'm using l'automatisation des tâches a été accueillie à bras ouverts. Now, accueillir à bras ouverts is also a good expression. I'm saying that this trend has been welcomed with open arms. So that is also kind of similar to saying that it has been replaced. And then in the third argument, we can see that I'm using remplacer once. And then in the last line, I'm saying serre impacté par la robotisation. Then in conclusion, I'm saying remplacer quelques professions and then I'm saying menacerait. So these are some examples that I'm using to ensure that I'm not just using one word which is remplacer and I'm using variety of vocabulary. Then the other thing is expression, advanced vocabulary and grammar. So for advanced vocabulary, I'm using subjunctive, bien que je comprenne. Then for expressions, I'm using mis au chômage, accueillir à bras ouverts, and I'm using for advanced vocabulary, I'm using cela est une certitude. In second argument, if you look at the last line, I'm using this expression pris du recul par rapport à. It is a very good expression. Then in conclusion, I'm using réaliser auprès des professionnels. This is also a good expression. Now, if you look at it more closely, you'll notice I'm using different tenses. I'm using passé composé, présent, conditionnel, future. And if you look at the comments from my teacher, she's saying très bonne rédaction. So overall good. I really like the arguments. They are relevant and well written. So overall, she is happy with my writing. But did I write like this always? Well, of course not. I had made a lot of mistakes, and this is exactly why I'm going to show you the kind of mistakes that I used to make. So let's look at some of these examples. So basically, she's saying structure is well written, good writing overall, but arguments are not very well written. They are not very clear. Number of words are more, 302, it should be less. Good writing overall, but you can simplify your sentences to avoid making some errors. It is very important. It was difficult to read it because some of the ideas were not very well written and the connectors were missing. In conclusion, she's saying that I should avoid making it too long and I should just say that pour les trois raisons, which I've actually started using, which you could also see in the previous example. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that I also used to make a lot of mistakes and I've learned it with time. And I just want to tell you guys that give it at least 2 to 3 months, and then you would be able to reach a level where it would be very easier for you to get B2 plus or even C1 or C1 plus. Now, based on the comments that I got from her, I have put together some points on this slide which we should always keep in mind. Number one, structure should be appropriate. That is the most important thing. Spend as much as time possible on the structure that to make sure that you have understood it well. So basically, we follow idea or topic statement, explanation, and example. Argument should be clear, very well written with relevant examples. Simplicity is the key. Try to keep your sentences simple and avoid any unnecessary errors. Don't lengthen a sentence just for the sake of it because it is unnecessary. It should be effortless reading. So to make it effortless reading, we should use appropriate connectors. I'll talk about that in a second. Your vocabulary should be rich. Write to the point and make sure that you write within 250 to 300 words, and so you also have a time to review twice. Short introduction and short conclusion. So these are some things which are extremely important. So whenever you write a letter, always go back and make sure that all of these pointers are checked and you have kept all of these things in mind when you were writing a letter. Now, for the structure for your introduction part, if you are for or against the article that you have read, these are the structure that you can use. For, you are going to write all three arguments in favor of the topic. For against, you are going to write all three arguments against the topic. So this is the structure you can use. Je suis tout à fait d'accord avec votre avis et j'aimerais partager mes réflexions avec vous sur ce sujet. In case you are mentioning all three arguments for the topic. If your all three arguments are against the topic, then you should say Je ne partage pas votre avis et j'aimerais vous expliquer pourquoi dans ce qui suit. Now, if you have a mixed opinion, now in mixed opinion, there could be two cases, one argument for and two against, or vice versa. So for both the cases, I've given examples here for introduction. You can use as is. Maybe you can take a screenshot or you can just pause the video and write it down. I just wanted to share it so that you have something handy and then you can tweak it as per your own choice. Now for connectors, there are three statements that we have in each argument that you are going to present in your letter. So first statement is idea statement, then development of ideas, and then example statements. So I've given some examples of connectors and you can probably use them in your letters. I've also put together some examples from other topics. So this topic is about avec l'ordinateur, on n'a pas besoin d'apprendre l'écriture à la main aux enfants. So I've written a letter on this topic following the same rules which we had just discussed. In this case, I've written overall 281 words, which is perfect. I think in the final exam, I ended up writing around the same range of 280 or 285. So this is one example which you can use, but I would suggest now that you have understood about the structure and what things do you need to keep in mind, rather than reading my letter, first try and give it an attempt from your side and then come back to my writing and just compare. I have one more example here. So similarly for this one also, I would suggest don't read my letter first and write your own copy and then you can come back and read this one and compare the both. Now, I also wanted to share some of the topics that you may come across. So it's better that you practice as much as possible on different topics because you never know, you may come across a topic which you have already done. So that is going to help you at least in the planning part for first 5-10 minutes so that you have some arguments ready and it is going to save you some time. So in the following slides, you will find some topics. So you can just probably take a screenshot so that you have these handy. But if you like, you can also go to the Facebook group. I think I got this list from TEF Canada Facebook group. And there people share a lot of their writing examples and their these topics as well. So if you like, you can just take a screenshot from this video or you can get these topics from the Facebook group.
Congratulations if you have come so far. I hope you have found this video helpful. If that is the case, please let me know in the comment section below. I also need some motivation for creating more content. So before I let you go, there is one last point which I want to make for people who have just started doing writing exam specific preparation. So for beginners, I would suggest just focus on getting the structure right and other fundamental things that we have discussed. But don't time your writing because it is going to be very overwhelming at this moment. So I would suggest probably about a month before the exam is when you should actually start using a timer. But for now, you should just focus on understanding the structure and how you should go about it. So that's it for today's video. I will see you very soon and I wish you all the best. Bye.